we put an exit pop. So when people try to leave the site, there's a full screen takeover. That is a register to win $100 XeroShoes.com gift certificate.
Yep.
The day we did that, the amount of the number, we went from, I don't know how many leads we were getting per day, per week, per month. It was small, but it suddenly jumped to like 3,000 a month. And it was very clear to me that I had, again, lost millions of dollars by not having done that sooner.
Welcome to the Heroes of E-commerce podcast, hosted by Russell Miller of Ryzeo. On this show, we speak to e-commerce business owners and leaders, the unsung heroes taking their industry by storm. Tune in as we share success stories and discuss e-commerce ideas to take your business to the next level. So let's dive in.
Okay. Hey everybody, welcome to Heroes of E-commerce. I'm your host, Russell Miller, and I am just super excited with our guest today, Steve Sashen. Did I pronounce it right?
Yeah, that'll work for me. And it's, if you're super excited now, that's a lot of pressure. I don't know.
That's a lot of pressure. I'm slightly interested.
Oh, I can clear that bar. That's easy.
I had a choice today between interviewing Steve and going to the dentist, and I was, well, Steve won out.
Well, my dad was a dentist, so
okay.
You can kind of get two bases.
Kind of get over there.
Yeah. Depends on what kind of dentist too.
Depends on what kind of dentist. So for our listeners, I think it's better if I kind of give the razzle dazzle. Steve is like an internet entrepreneur from way back with major props, and I want to kind of like dig into that. And his latest venture is Xero Shoes, and he's grown this from zero to millions of dollars.
Let's not be coy. Last year we did 33.6 million.
33.6 million. Also well known for knowing his numbers inside and out. And so our listeners are, also e-commerce entrepreneurs. And so this is like, this to me is like a get, because I think it's really, they want to talk to people who have, walked the walk, so to speak. To me, it's really interesting because I just read Shoe Dog.
Oh my.
And I'm assuming you did too. So that'll be an interesting, I don't know, compare and contrast.
Yeah, no, actually I didn't read it. My wife did, but I haven't yet. In part because I just know a lot of people who are involved in that story. And for people who don't know, it's the Nike story effectively. But what I can tell you, FYI, if you like that book, there's another one called Swoosh.
Okay.
And the reason to read Swoosh, and that is not easy to say, is it's a little more behind the scenes and a little less curated. And what I mean by that is the footwear industry in the 70s and 80s, it was a little Caligula-esque, and they don't talk about that in Shoe Dog. And there's a lot of, things are a little dirtier in Swoosh, and in every possible connotation of that word. The footwear industry is a fascinating industry, and that's about as euphemistic as I can be.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, noted. Okay, so the way I like to start off all of because it's called Heroes of E-commerce, and no hero is complete without an origin story. So I wanted to dig into your origin story, and I heard it was something like you've been doing internet entrepreneurship forever. So take us back.
Yeah, I'm one of the OGs. So let's see, origin story. Okay, when a mommy loves a daddy very much, sometimes, it's a long story. Boy, oh boy, the first thing I started doing in terms of the internet marketing world was in 1992. I think I'm one of the first guys to figure out SEO, but back then it was pretty simple. Keyword stuff, a bunch of white text on a white background, submit an article to the 3 article directories, and away you go.
Right.
But there wasn't anyone doing that. I mean, there was a time in 92, 93 where I outranked anybody who had an infomercial. Tony Robbins, what's his name? What's his first name? Lepre. I just blanked on his first name. Anyway, these guys were selling all this stuff online,
right,
via infomercials. I outranked them for their own names. just because. I mean, there was no way to make money on that at the time. There was no such thing as e-commerce.
Right.
Couldn't actually take a credit card. You could have someone submit a form where they submitted a credit card, but there was no way to actually do real-time processing. So and I was just goofing around, really. And then I started a software company way back when in 1992, late 92. I invented the industry standard word processing software for film and television writers. It was called Scriptware. And as part of just making that work, I figured out how to do internet marketing. But my favorite kind of OG story, one of the other guys from way back when, is a guy named Jonathan Mizell. And I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and unbeknownst to me, Mizell was right up the street. He put together the first internet marketing course. And he noticed one day that when his assistant had to mail the package to me, she had to walk by my office to then take the package to FedEx. And I noticed the same thing, that the return address was 5 blocks away. And so I called him, he called me, I don't know, someone called someone, and we got together. And there was just a small group of people doing internet marketing back then. There was, actually, I got to give you a funny story. Mizell and 2 other guys, Declan Dunn and Marlon Sanders, were part of a little group that was going around selling GeoCities to people. And the whole idea, this is pre-AOL, this is like in the, CompuServe, Prodigy days, but GeoCities, their whole pitch was, basically getting a piece of internet landscape or internet real estate. And my favorite thing, I went to one of the pitches, and they were saying, look, there's so many ways you can make money online. There's a woman in New York named Stacy Horn. Stacy runs a computer bulletin board system. She has a computer in her living room, and people log in and they do all these things on there and they chat with each other. And she's making $25,000 a year with this computer in her bedroom. Who wouldn't want that? And I think they said, who would want that? And everyone raised their hand but me, because I knew Stacy Horn. That bulletin board system was a thing called Echo. If you were on the West Coast, there was something similar called the Well. And I knew that it was
she ran Echo. Oh, wow.
Ran Echo. And I knew it was costing her like 50 grand to make that 20. So,
oh my God. Wow, this is like somewhere.
Were you an Echo guy way back when?
No, I was, yeah, so for our listeners, you can just pause, because nothing relevant for another 10, 15 minutes. But I think I came in like right after CompuServe. I started on Prodigy and dial-up bulletin boards.
Oh yeah.
And so which were interesting, because it was a a self-hosted, unregulated internet.
Yeah.
But things like Echo were the closest thing we got to like an AOL before, before
it was pre-AOL. The thing that was interesting about Echo was that we had these face-to-face meetings every, I don't remember how often. And it was just, these were people who were building the internet before there was even an internet. And it was a lot of really smart people doing a lot of very clever and very funny things. I mean, for a while, Stacy told me one of the things that she used as an example for what you could do on this bulletin board system was a thread that I started. People who met my cat wanted her to have kittens. So I posted a personal ad from my cat. So it was SGF, single gray feline, looking for, and I did this whole thing. Someone else on Echo, they had 2 male cats. And so we, they had a little date got together, and that was the thing. So, but the whole thread of everyone posting as their cats and vying for the attention of my cat was just utterly hysterical. And it's one of those things that's just lost to the ether, unfortunately, because it was a brilliant little thread that said a lot about what it was like way back when.
And for our younger audiences, these were the first NFTs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had, what were some of your sort of early e-commerce ventures or early kind of internet ventures?
It's a long time ago, that 1992. So it's hard for me to remember much. I'll tell you one of the, I'll do this. So what got me into developing software, I ended up with a master's degree in film from Columbia University. And the software for writing screenplays was really, really awkward and silly and stupid and didn't work the way it made sense in my brain. My background was cognitive psychology at Duke University. And I was basically one of the first UI UX guys before there was a thing called UI UX.
Sorry, another sidebar. Did you work with JB Ryan? Was that?
I did, not with him directly. I worked with his kids. So the Rhine
Okay.
Institute.
Tell the listener. Sorry, this is
Okay.
also irrelevant but funny. Who is Dr. Rhine?
So J.B. Rhine was one of the first guys who decided that researching psychic phenomenon was a valid course of study. Most people disagreed with him. And when I got to Duke, they were right off campus. They weren't literally part of Duke University, but they were right off the East Campus of Duke. And when I got there as a freshman, I went over there and I don't know, I volunteered or I did something or I demonstrated something. They wanted to test me. So I was involved in just a whole bunch of research. And at one point I sat down with them and I said, the problem that you have is that you are treating this like it's science instead of social science. This is if anything, this is a social science phenomenon, not a hard science phenomenon. And the way you're constructing studies is not really good for that. That did not go over very well, obviously. But I was really I've always been intrigued simply by finding what's actually true underneath the mythology of something. So I had a lot of fun hanging out with them, but I just didn't feel like they were conducting their research in a way that was going to reveal anything pro or con in a really meaningful way. Now,
So
since
just
then,
bad science. Yeah.
it was, let's say, call it not good science, to be kind.
Gotcha.
Which is, it's very easy to do not good science. It's very hard to do good science. And the line between the two is a little tricky. So I did some stuff with them during my freshman year, and then I went, this is not my thing. If for no other reason, then it didn't seem like they were ever going to be able to prove anything. And at some point soon thereafter, I realized most likely because there is no thing there to prove.
That was going to be my second question. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, so I literally can barely remember what I was doing or how I was trying to figure out how to sell things. I can tell you back in 92, my best friend at the time, who a year or two later, or maybe 91, somewhere right in there, he co-founded a company called agency.com, the first internet marketing and web development agency that when they went public, he was a billionaire for a day. And I said to him, we're still best friends. And I said to him a while ago, being your best friend cost me hundreds of millions of dollars. And he said, why is that? I said, I didn't have the heart to short your stock the day so, that was a thing. He called me before they started agency.com. This is back like maybe 1990. He was working at an ad agency that had gotten the first copy of Photoshop and a like washer dryer sized photorealistic printer and some, giant scanner as well. And he said, take a look at this. And he scanned some image in, put it into this beta version of Photoshop, did a step and repeat on some, some item in that image, like a rubber duck or something, and then printed it out and it looked photorealistic. And my first response was, oh, we're all screwed. No one's going to know the difference between reality and fiction within a very short time. And it, of course, has only gotten worse since then. The other thing I did when I was getting my degree in screenwriting, there was one piece of software that existed that was a post-processing text formatter. You wrote in whatever word processor you had, ran the script through this other post-processing thing, and then it did all the pagination and some of the formatting that's required for television and film screenplays, which is this really archaic set of rules that make no sense whatsoever, but have been around for over 100 years. And I couldn't afford the $300 for the software. Mm-hmm. So I found 5 guys to split it with, and I cracked their copy protection, knowing nothing about code, but I'm good about pattern recognition. So I looked at the hex code and I figured out that all looks random. Wait, that looks like a pattern. What happens if I change that little piece of hex code to something else? And I realized that's where they were storing my name and address and all these other things. So my first little foray into internet marketing was hacking a piece of code and then splitting it with some friends who were professional writers on sitcoms and soap operas and things. And then I ended up figuring out a better way to do that thing. What Scriptware was, just for the fun of it, and this is not worth diving into too far, it's a rules-based, object-oriented, context-sensitive database that acts like a word processor. So it does all this super complicated formatting and pagination in real time, WYSIWYG, with no macros, no keystrokes, no nothing, all, totally ready to print the moment you're done typing. And to this day, no one's been able to replicate what I've done. There's been dozens and dozens of screenwriting software programs that have come out, all trying to copy what I came up with in 92 and was unable to patent because there was no such thing as, there was no precedent for the kind of thing that I had done. And in fact, just the simple dialog boxes for opening a file and saving a file, did these things in DOS with high ASCII characters to make things look like graphics. But the functionality of those dialog boxes, you would recognize because they look pretty modern. But when I came up with it in 92, no one did anything even close to it till maybe 97, 98. And I had a number of IP judges say to me, yeah, you basically invented a user experience that everyone else copied or figured out years later on their own, but there was no way to protect it. If there were, you would be the richest man in the world, because every piece of software would have been using your IP and would have had to pay you a penny a pop. And that would have been a whole thing. So, and this is going to be a bit of a theme if we find themes, but, and I say this not patting myself on the back, but literally this is a problem. I have been a little ahead of my time a couple times. And being the first one to do something is usually not the way to make the most money. Being the guy who rips off the first one usually is.
That's and I'm going to skip around too, because I tend to have, as I'm realizing as I've been talking, that I would gladly go off into some really, really fun tangents, but I want to make sure that so our target is like, a guy, a gal, or a husband and wife team that has a small e-commerce business, and they're trying to get it from like a lifestyle business into a, what you've done with Xero, into a real business.
Yeah.
And so what was the first one where you thought, maybe one of the smaller ones where it actually, I want to kind of take them through this journey, kind of the hero's journey of e-commerce.
The journey, there's literally too many. So I got good at SEO. I was doing SEO consulting. I did some copywriting. One of the things that I did, maybe 94-ish. I can't remember. Don't hold me to dates because I don't do time very well. But it was after I moved to Colorado, which was in 93. And I had purchased some products, some health and nutritional supplements from some network marketing salesperson, and loved the products and noticed they didn't have a website. So I built my own website for those products and did really, really well. Then I ended up consulting I just realized this is funny. I ended up consulting for that company. I'm now in the building they were in.
Oh, wow.
Totally coincidentally. But I did, and then I ended up writing a bit of a treatment or a first draft of a book about internet marketing from all the things that I did and all the things that I'd learned that I hadn't done. And in that process, the potential publisher asked me if I had done everything in the book, and I said no. And they introduced me to someone who had done some of the things I hadn't done. And that led to, meeting a handful of other people. And we reinvented how to do lead generation for network marketing on the internet. We were really the first company to do that. And in the process, sold a lot of product, did something very interesting in that I didn't pitch the business opportunity. I only was selling the products. That's what I was doing. And I was only selling the products if I believed in them and I could tell the truth about them. So there was no hyperbole. Like I did an ad for one of the first acai products. And I basically said, if anyone tells you this is going to change your life, run the other way because they're lying to you. This is basically an antioxidant. If you believe in antioxidants, and here's the reason why you might, then you might want to try this one because that's what it is and it tastes great. It's got a money back guarantee. But everything was just like telling the truth, which was just so much simpler than doing anything else, frankly. And we also, because we'd gotten really good at doing lead gen, suddenly there was this international market that didn't exist before. And so we needed to find a company that we could work with that was international. So the first thing we did is we moved to Herbalife. And I'm really good at figuring out systems and loopholes. And so I got everyone in our organization to immediately jump to the highest compensation level possible on the first day they were part of the company. And it took Herbalife 6 months to figure out what we did because no one had ever figured it out before. And then it turned out that they couldn't handle what we were doing because we were so much more sophisticated about lead gen and the internet. and taking advantage of their compensation plan, that what happened is that one of our partners started his own network marketing company, and
Oh,
part of that. So, and it was all based on predominantly digital products and some physical products to take advantage of the internet. So anyway, there was all that going on simultaneous with my running Scriptware, my screenwriting software company.
yeah.
You know, I was a single guy. I had an extra hour in the evening to do all those things. I got really good at buying and selling leads, of auditing people who I was buying leads from, who said that these were all American visitors who were coming to the website, finding out they were all from Bangladesh, and just, you know, diving in. But to your point, backing up to your comment about people who are currently running lifestyle businesses who want it to be more, let me just address that.
Yeah.
So with Xero Shoes, we never intended it to be a real business.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
What happened, and I'll do the shortest version of this. When I was 45, I got back into sprinting after a 30-year break. I was getting injured pretty much constantly for the next 2 years. And a world champion runner that I know suggested that I try running barefoot to see what I learned. Really quick, I'm not going to suggest people run barefoot, even though it changed my life, and there's lots of reasons to do it, but that's not important. It changed my life because I discovered that my injuries were coming from a form problem that I had that I couldn't feel in regular shoes because of the thickness of the sole and other aspects of running shoes that get in the way of actually running properly. Running barefoot, basically doing it wrong hurts, doing it right feels good. And doing it right and feeling good got rid of my injuries. I became faster. I'm a Masters All-American sprinter. So that time for men over 45, and then for men over 50, 55, now 60, I'm one of the fastest guys in the country at the 100 meters outdoors, 60 meters indoors. And that barefoot experience was so profound. I wanted to have it as much as I could have it, but I was sick of arguing with people about getting into restaurants, about whether it was legal to be barefoot in a restaurant. By the way, it almost always is. My wife was getting tired of me walking in onto our white carpet with my dirty feet. So I made a pair of sandals based on a 10,000-year-old design. And people kept asking me to make some for them, and they told two friends, and they told two friends. And finally, a guy says that he had a contract to write a book about barefoot running, and if I treated this little sandal making hobby like a business, he'd put me in the book. Well, by that point, I'd built, probably 500, 600 websites, some for some clever SEO things that maybe we can talk about. And I rushed home, pitched this incredible opportunity to my wife, who told me I was a complete idiot and it won't make any money. It was a waste of time and don't do this. And I said, all right, yeah.
Now sidebar to wives, usually that's the right advice, like 95,
Absolutely.
96.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely the right advice. And so I said I wouldn't do it. And then she went to bed and I built a website.
Yeah.
And because that's what we do. And she kind of growled at me. And I said, look, the keywords that I care about, I'll probably be able to own them all within about 3 months. It'll be a good case study for a search engine marketing business we're starting.
Right.
And I was completely wrong. It only took me 6 weeks. And for the first maybe year, every keyword that I cared about, I had between 30 and 40 of the top 50 search results.
Wow.
Because
what year was this, just to level set?
90, this was 2009, end of 2009.
Okay, so no longer white text and white background. What did you have to do?
A lot of video and a lot of syndication and just as much content as you could possibly create in as many different platforms as possible.
And were you creating the content, or did you kind of like systematize?
Yeah, it was all me. Basically what I did is I gave away the entire business. So what we were selling was a do-it-yourself sandal making kit. And so I made 3 videos because you had a limit of 10 minutes per video on YouTube.
Yeah.
I made 3 videos of how to make sandals, and then I made a few others, and I basically just gave away the farm. So
why?
There's a whole line. I don't remember who came up with the phrase moving the free line. Anything that you were going to normally sell, give it away. It builds trust and awareness, and it just has value. You'll always be able to find a way to capitalize on something else that's going to be more valuable than the thing that you're giving away. And so
this is like the marketing version of open source.
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, I met people. My favorite thing is I've met people who started companies that were completely ripping me off. And their origin story was, well, we were looking for something and couldn't find it. So we started our own thing. It's like, dude, that's my product. You've practically used my.
Oh, geez.
Yeah,
But
I
you
mean,
still won. I mean,
oh,
interesting.
yeah, no, it's fine with me. It's totally cool. And look, I wasn't even the first one doing this. There was a guy selling similar materials to what we started selling, and he was admitting almost proudly that if you ordered from him, it might take him 3 or 4 weeks to get something to you because he wasn't really running this like a business. And so
Yeah.
I emailed him on day one when I built the website, and I said, I just want you to know what we're doing. And he said, I don't know if I should be happy or cry. I said, oh, you should be ecstatic because I'm such a better marketer than you. It's going to raise the tide for both of us. And years later, cutting to the chase, I met him at a trade show, and I said, was I right? He goes, yeah. I mean, I made him more money than he ever thought was possible with his business because I helped bring awareness to the whole thing. And then he got a little more serious as well. So, but in those early year and a half, we were running this thing out of our house. It started out on the floor of a corner of a spare bedroom, then expanded into an extra bedroom that was my wife's office, and the basement became my office, and the living room became shipment and fulfillment. And the dining room was our customer service. We hired a guy to come in and help do customer service. And all the inventory was in our garage and every square inch that we had. And at one point, I turned to my wife and I said, wouldn't it be nice to have a little internet-based business, made a couple $100,000 a year, took a couple hours a day to run? She goes, that's what we have. I said, yeah, but it can't stay that way. We're too vulnerable. And I didn't really have much more beyond that. But at the 2-year mark, people kept telling us that we should be on Shark Tank, and we didn't know what they were talking about. And so we looked up the show, watched every previous episode, watched all the previous episodes from the Canadian Dragon's Den, from the British Dragon's Den. And again, to shorten the story tremendously, we applied to be on the show, and they said they were interested. And in the time that it took from the time they said, we want you on the show, to the time we got on the show, it just forced us to get really clear about what we wanted personally. And it also made us realize that what we had done by accident is something that I highly recommend. And that, well, I'll say it this way. My wife has a line. She says, there's enough shoe companies in the world. You don't need another shoe company unless your shoes change people's lives. And from the day we started the business, that's what we are hearing from people, that getting out of big, thick, padded, motion controlled, arch supporting, stiff shoes and letting your feet do what's natural was literally changing people's lives, whether it was just finding something comfortable or aligning their posture better or helping them walk in a way that's more natural and uses their feet and ankles and hips and knees better and their muscles, ligaments, and tendons better. So we realized this was going to be an opportunity where we're on the entrepreneurial retirement program. I was however old, I'm 50 now, I'm 60 now. So, this was whatever, 10, 11 years ago. And we're doing this thing that's already helping people change their lives. Let's go all in. And by that time, back to you're mentioning Shoe Dog, I had also discovered that the footwear industry is a bunch of, and pardon me, I'm going to get technical when I say this, mostly lying sacks of shit. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that, I say that because I've decided that I'm not interested in making friends anymore, because it's important to do the right thing. And I can tell you that in the years that we've been doing this, the number of people who are at the highest levels of multi-billion-dollar footwear brands who have said directly to us or directly to one person that we know, that they know that what we're doing about natural movement is legitimate, but that they can't do it because they otherwise would be admitting that they've been lying to people for 50 years.
Well, I understand where they're coming from, because it's very hard
to change course.
Yeah, when you're, and actually this is interesting because I was reading The Innovator's Dilemma, which has a really, basically the same lesson from like IBM, who had gone all in on mainframes.
Right.
And then when mini computers come out, like their own engineers were like, yeah, no, this is the way to go.
But there's a difference. Here's the difference. The difference is prior to 1972, all footwear looked more like ours. If you look at the original Nike waffle trainer, it was basically flat with just a tiny bit of cushioning. It was a decent minimalist shoe. If you look at the other part is during the intervening, years since I've been doing this, the amount of research that's come out to back up everything that we've been saying about natural movement, which is kind of stupid. I call it the dumbest science ever, because we're basically proving use it or lose it. You know,
Right.
using your feet is better than not using your feet. Moving
Yeah.
something that's supposed to move is better than immobilizing it. But Dr. Irene Davis, when she was at Harvard, used to say, if you looked in the history of the literature about running injuries and their cause and prevention and cure, you won't find any of that literature prior to about 1972, 74, because it just wasn't happening, because people weren't wearing shoes that engendered movement patterns that are causative for injuries. The reason that the modern running shoe looks the way it does is because some orthopedic podiatrists told Bill Bowerman that he needed to put a wedge of foam in the shoes so that people's Achilles that had been shortened from wearing higher heel dress shoes could accommodate running. 30 years later, one of those doctors was at a track meet with a friend of mine, a guy that I've done some footwear development with, who worked directly with Bowerman. And my friend said to one of these doctors, you know, your idea has become ubiquitous. Every modern athletic shoe has this wedge of foam in it. What do you think? And the guy said, biggest mistake we ever made.
Wow.
We had no reason to suggest that. We were just seeing everything with a prosthetic view. And so we came up with a prosthetic solution to Bowerman's problem about people having Achilles problems, but we had no evidence for it, and it's caused nothing but problems. So we're not the intervention. We're not getting, you know, the intervention is the modern athletic shoe that in the last 50 years, I have arguments with people about this all the time, where they go, well, these shoe companies, you know, must know what they're doing. They have, you know, millions of dollars they're spending on R&D. I go, yeah, then how come in the last 50 years, the injury rates for runners have not changed, despite all their quote R&D and advances?
Okay, so let me breaking, because I don't want to get too far down that line.
Yeah.
But let me summarize it by saying is like, you had a strong conviction about why your product was better, you know, than what was sort of out
I
there.
want to clarify. It wasn't a conviction. It's not an opinion. The research is unequivocal. The research is undeniable. The experience of human beings. I mean, anecdotes does not equal data, but a preponderance of anecdotal information is a data point.
Right.
And over the years, we keep getting more and more and more and more and more people saying, you know, I'm not allowed to make medical claims, but saying that they've been helped in myriad ways. This is not the same as opining. And when there's the amount of research when we started in 2009 was somewhat small, but there was still a bunch there suggesting very clearly that, again, using your feet naturally, letting them bend and flex and move and feel the ground. You have more nerve endings in the soles of your feet than anywhere but your fingertips and your lips. That's not an accident. That's to tell your brain what you're stepping on or in, so it knows how to move your body well. You know, you're not supposed to squeeze your toes together, which all modern athletic shoes pretty much, they squeeze your toes together. In fact, almost all shoes, they squeeze your toes. You don't do push-ups with your fingers squeezed together because that's bad for balance and strength. Same thing with your toes.
Out.
Yeah.
Well, so you had a fact-based.
Yes, I was lucky enough that we stumbled into a business where we knew what the truth was. Right. And knowing the truth makes you imperturbable and unstoppable. And it's hard.
Let's put that into practice. So if we look at like before Shark Tank, it looks like your growth was from SEO.
Yeah, well, no, it was two things. It was SEO, it was SEO and word of mouth. Word of mouth has continued to be a huge thing. So, but I want to, I want to kind of finish this one thought really quickly that we started a few times, and I keep getting diverted because I do. Preparing to be on Shark Tank is what gave us everything that you can think of to say, all right, we're going all in. I mean, in fact, Lena literally walked in at like the year mark and did the appropriate poker hand gesture and said, okay, I'm all in. In fact,
what does that mean?
Well, for one, she very early on realized if this is going to be serious, I was going to be the marketing product person and she was going to be the operations and finance person, because she's a brilliant operations finance person and I'm a marketing guy and a product guy. It just so happens I had a natural tendency or natural something predilection to understand footwear and feet and biomechanics. And so that was my world. That was her world. And we were going to commit to everything that we had to making this work. This was going to be our A, way of trying to change the world, and B, turning it into something where we can retire from this at some point, assuming we ever want to retire. Right. And it was just a statement that this is not something we're going to, do casually. We're serious about this and everything that entails. So to take a business from lifestyle to serious business, part of it is just do you really want to do this personally? Because here's the other part about being all in. We took our first kind of vacation in 13 years last month. And I still checked email, and did things online for 2 hours a day because I still had to get stuff done. We haven't had a real vacation in 13 years. I haven't worked less than 60 hours a week in 10 years, maybe 11 years. And we, in part because when you grow as quickly as we are, even if you bring in people to take on things you do, then you have to manage them and get them up to speed. And in our situation, what we're doing is so different than what anyone else has done. And I'll say more about that specifically when it comes to advertising. In fact, we can't go in and let them just do what they've done in the past. They have to learn a whole new way of being and thinking to work with us on our company. And so it's not just a personal thing of, do I want to commit a good chunk of my life to this?
Yeah.
But it's also, do I want to be committed and connected to that product? And how do I want to do it? When I started this, I didn't want to be the face of the company. I wanted it to be sort of anonymous. So if we ever sold it, I wasn't attached to it.
Right.
But humans relate to other humans. And suddenly, I mean, like those first videos I made, you see my face for 5 seconds saying, hey, I'm Steven Sashen, and now I'm going to show you how to make a sandal. And then it's 10 minutes of looking at my feet, which led to a whole other set of emails and comments that I would get that involved, hey, can we get more video of your feet? Well, that was a lot of that. So, and I said no. But there's lots of kinds of commitment, your personal commitment to the product and to the business. And frankly, we also thought that we'd be in and out faster than we have been. We thought maybe after a few years, we could sell this thing for like $5 million and we never have to work again. But no one wanted us when we could have been sold for 5 million. No one wanted us when we could have been sold for 10 or 15.
Really?
Nope. They just didn't.
That seems okay. Interesting.
In some businesses, some industries, you can do that, but in ours, basically in the footwear world, they don't think you're for real till you're over 30, 40 million. And we kept I talked to one company who could have bought us. And I said, now would be a great time. They said, we only look at companies over 40 million in revenue. And I said, why? They said, well, they're safer. There's just less risk. And it takes the same amount of time to deal with a $2 million or $40 million company. I said, but Harvard Business Review has looked at that. That's not true. There's no difference in the risk profile. You can buy a company that's doing 100 million and it still could go under. And you could buy a company for $10 and it could, go through the roof. Well, even still. And I said, look, if you wait till we're 40 million, it's going to cost you 20 times as much to buy us.
Right.
And they looked at me like I was a little crazy. And I went, oh, right. You're a $4 billion brand. If you bought us for 20 times what we're asking for now, it's still a rounding error. It's still your catering bill.
Yeah, that's the thing. Boy, that gets into a farce. Never mind. I'm going to not make a comment.
Okay. So anyway, the end of the whole thing about, going from lifestyle to serious business. And what's really funny? I just remembered this. There was a lot of this going on after Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Workweek, came out.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah.
There's all these people who thought, hey, just try to lather, rinse, and repeat what he did, ignoring the fact that, by the way, I reviewed that book for the Dutch publisher before it got published. And she said, what'd you think? I said, well, you're going to sell 1 million copies off the title alone. And she goes, yeah, that's why we bought it. I said, but it's predominantly irreproducible, what he said. Chapter 2 of that book is, if I could do it, you can too. But if you read it carefully, it's very clear that Tim Ferriss is and was a freak and was in this, rather unusual, and I mean that in a kind way, but he's a rare bird in a rare situation with a rare product and a rare set of skills that was not reproducible. I said, the moment this book comes out, he'll never have a 4-hour work week in his life.
Yeah, he's a compulsively working autodidact, right? Absolutely. With a genius level intellect. So yeah, if you can do that, sure. But even he was working like 80 hours a week. So,
but there was all these people who then created these little things where they found some product, or maybe they were outsourcing it, or licensing it was, and they had these little lifestyle businesses making 30 to 50 grand a year. And I said to all of them back then, if you're going to try and make this real and maybe something you could sell and retire on, you're going to have to get serious. And I watched maybe 8 out of 10 of those guys bail or stick to something that wasn't a good idea. And only, literally 2 out of 10, and I'm thinking literally only 2 people, did whatever it took to then turn what they were doing into a real business. And so, that's part number one, is like, just take a serious look at what you're selling, what you're doing, the lifestyle that it's going to require, the commitment it's going to require, and cross your fingers, because it's possible you could, whatever you think is going to happen isn't, in both good and bad ways. It may be that you sell it after a year. It may be that it takes you 20 years. And you got to, and don't be, we're all entrepreneurs, we're optimistic, but don't get hyper optimistic and go, yeah, I hear what he's saying, but my idea is so good, I know someone's definitely going to buy it. And there's going to be someone who proves me, quote, wrong, even though I'm not making a specific statement, but demonstrates that they, started something and sold it 2 days later for $10 billion. But there's going to be more people where you're going to be really working harder than you ever imagined.
Yeah, let's deflate our listeners' expectations a little bit. How long was it from Shark Tank to, like, how many years from Shark Tank to where you are today?
We taped the show in July of 2012. It aired originally the end of January 2013, and then again the beginning of June of 2013. So here we are 9 years later.
Yeah, so an overnight success in only 9 years.
Well, yes, but here's what's even crazier. So when we were on Shark Tank, and by the way, CNBC just republished our episode under a new thing they're calling Shark Tank Misses. So that they just they cut, yeah.
Sorry,
it was great. Well, they cut out the beginning where it's the home package where they're showing us around the house, et cetera.
Right.
And they just show the pitch. And at the end, it says, Xero Shoes turned down a $400,000 offer from Kevin for 50% of the company. Last year, they did 33.6 million. But when we were on the show, we were selling a do-it-yourself sandal making kit. And that's all we had for our first 3.5 years of business. We didn't have a closed-toe shoe until the end of 2016. And then another one in 17, and then another one by the end of 17. And now there's 30 different styles of casual and performance boot, shoes, and sandals. So it's a whole different world.
So I read all of the articles beforehand as my prep, and that you had written on or done on Starter Story. And I found those super valuable to learn. There were a number of kind of inflection points, like things you sort of did differently to get to the next stage.
Yeah.
Can you tell our listeners about a couple of the key ones? Like, you're like, it was going okay, and then we had to change something to get to the next level.
Well, let me say this.
Yeah.
These things only make sense in retrospect.
Sure.
In real time, you're just doing whatever you need to do. Now, we never had to pivot. We never realized that. I mean, actually, I take it back. This was not a pivot, but our original business model, in fact, the first original business model, was that we were going to make these foot scanning kiosks. So you could walk into a store, scan your feet. We would get that scan. We would make a custom made version of one of these sandals based on this 10,000-year-old design idea and overnight it to you. And we were going to give away the kiosks and make everyone who had a kiosk an affiliate. So it's like, here's a free thing, put it in your shoe store, put it in your wherever store. Well, it'll generate money. It was a great idea, except that we couldn't find the, what's the word I'm looking for? The machinery to actually do the cutting part properly with rubber, because rubber is a very tricky material to work with. But more importantly, the kiosks were going to cost about 10 grand a piece. And there was just no way that was going to work.
Got it.
So that was part one. But then what happened was people would be wearing our sandals and they'd say, I love these sandals, but what do I do when it's cold out? Or what do I do if I have to go to work? I can't wear my normal shoes anymore. So that's when we got inspired to make shoes, but we didn't have the ability to do this. I like to say that 90% of what got us from the beginning to where we are today is luck. And the other 10% is, it's also luck. And then there's a separate 100% that 90% is working your butt off. And the other 10% is hopefully being smart enough to figure out how to put out the fires that started overnight, despite the fact that nothing changed since yesterday. So one of the big lucky things was that a friend of ours, while walking his dog, which he normally didn't do, his wife did, met a guy who was walking his dog, which he normally didn't do, his wife did. The two guys started talking and our friend says, what do you do? And this guy, Dennis Driscoll, says, I'm the chief product officer at Crocs. Our friend said, hey, my friend Steven and Elena have a shoe company, which we didn't. We had a company selling sheets of rubber, string, and instructions for making a 10,000-year-old sandal. And so Dennis gave the guy his phone number, passed it on to me. I sat on it for months thinking, why would this guy want to talk to me? And then we got together for lunch. I called him up And at the end of what was supposed to be a half an hour lunch turned into a 4-hour meeting. And I said, I would love to work with someone like you someday. But I mean, my God, you've been making hundreds of thousands of dollars for the last 40 years. He said, yeah, but I tried your sandals and they changed my life and I'm retired now. So how can I help?
Wow.
Now, if that hadn't happened, we definitely wouldn't be here. If my wife hadn't gone from avoiding me like the plague to becoming my friend, to becoming my girlfriend, to becoming my fiance, to becoming my wife, we wouldn't be here. And that's a whole story. So, so the first inflection point was, I mean, the littlest one was, again, just the SEO stuff we did at the beginning, which got us to having a decent little business that we could have lived on if we wanted to keep it small. To then Shark Tank. Dennis Dennis joined us just a couple of weeks after we taped Shark Tank. So he's been here now 10 years. And then we started listening to our customers. Again, what do I do when it's cold? What do I do if I need something else? And we started making those products. We listened to them and did what they basically told us to do. And here's another inflection point. We originally met at the 7-month mark. We were introduced to some people who'd been in the footwear business for 35 years, who said, this natural movement idea that you're capitalizing on is the most important thing in footwear, and no one's doing it anymore. So how can we help? And they gave us a ton of help, including introducing us to manufacturing in Korea. And we got kicked out of Korea because we were asking people to we were demanding a level of quality that they had no interest in producing, because we were a tiny little company and it was changing their whole production methodology, which was not going to happen. Right. So we got kicked out of Korea. When we were doing our do-it-yourself sandals, what normally is an outsole for a shoe, the bottom part that touches the ground, that's our whole product. So the quality of the upper was important because that's the part that was on people's feet. That's the part they were seeing.
Right.
But when you're making an outsole for a shoe, you don't care about the upper or the top of it, because that's just get glued onto another layer. And you don't care if the weight is a little bit off, because no one's going to ever notice, because the shoe is so much heavier than just that product, just the outsole part. But that was our whole product.
I'm sorry. Let's pause for a minute. Okay, so you realize that the upper was super important because that's what people saw, the upper sole.
Well, yeah, I mean, what normally was a piece that got glued onto a bunch of other things was our whole product. So the whole thing needed to be paid attention to. Like the left one had to weigh the same as the right one. The bigger one should weigh more than the smaller ones. Stuff that seems really obvious. Right. And we complained about this. They said, well, how much did it cost you to deal with this? And I said, very righteously indignant, like $5,000 or $6,000. And they said, well, to fix it would cost you $50,000. It's like,
oh, wow.
Oh, so when we asked them to make changes, because we're a tiny little company, we didn't realize how this worked. They fired us, that factory. And then when we tried to find other factories in and around Korea, they all heard about us already and heard that we were stupid and demanding. So we lost all that. Coincidentally, at that time, there was a footwear industry magazine that on the cover featured a guy who had been based in New York, manufacturing in Asia since the early 70s. And we called him to see if he'd be willing to help. I flew to New York. We met with their team. I found out years later, he did a bunch of due diligence and called a bunch of people in the industry who, for reasons that to this day, I can't understand why, they said all these wonderful things about Lena, my wife, and I. And so these guys decided to help us with manufacturing. And so that was a huge and important deal. Anyway, I could say something silly about them, but making stuff is hard. Making shoes is super hard. It's the simplest thing I can say. But so
why do you think why did they say they wanted to work with you?
I literally don't know. I think, I've talked to some of the people that they talked to when they were vetting us, who believed in us since day one. And I honestly don't know why. We were doing this weird little thing, making these goofy ass sandals. And I'd have to ask them. I mean, suffice it to say, Lena and I are both smart people. We had a good vision for what we were doing. We had a reason for doing it. We had people saying, this is changing my life, which I keep harping on. So, but honestly, I have no idea. I will find some of them in the next few months and ask them, and maybe we'll have an answer. But the fact that they did say nice things about us and helped us. I mean, there was people who were running companies that were $500-600 million who, when we met them and showed them what we were doing, literally just said, how can we help?
Wow.
And that happened over and over and over. And to be totally sort of strangely candid and something, it only occurred to me again in retrospect how unusual that was. At the time, it seemed like, well, of course they would want to help. Look what we're doing. So that was just a little naive on my part. And in fact, the guys that we met at that 7-month mark who were helping us out, they said to us, we believe in what you're doing and we believe in you. And we would run this business with you. We would start this with you. We would invest with you, except that we've been in footwear so long that we're not stupid enough to try and start a shoe company. And my wife and I both looked at them and said, well, the only way anything ever gets started is by being hyper optimistic and naive. So we're in, and here we are. And we still feel somewhat that way, even though we've learned a lot in the last 13 years. They're still.
And those guys came in like around what year and then helped you with what became your manufacturing partners?
They came in at the 7-month mark. We met them at the 4 or 5 month mark. Then they came and sat down at our dining room table. Sorry, for IRS tax purposes, our conference room table. And they helped with finding us manufacturing. They helped with some design and logo things. They helped us understand some of the financials. I'll never forget when they said,
godmother. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. I'll never forget when they said that they were spending $5,000 a month on FedEx just to send stuff back and forth. And we thought that was an insane amount of money. And I would love to have a $5,000 monthly FedEx bill these days. That would be awesome. We're way past that. So it's sort of like years ago, I did a lecture at the Small Business Administration for budding entrepreneurs. And I said, how many of you heard when you're coming up with your first projections about your income and your expenses, that you should double the expenses and half the income, because that's going to be more realistic? And everyone raised their hand. I said, yeah, don't even do that. Because whatever number you write down, you'll make half as much of that. And whatever number you write down for the cost, it'll cost you twice that. Doesn't matter what you write. It won't be what you think. You will never imagine that you're going to have a $100,000 legal bill. And if you're in business long enough, that's going to seem cheap at some point. So, these things are unfathomable at the beginning of your entrepreneurial venture. So they helped us with just everything you could think of. They introduced us to people. They took us to trade shows that we didn't know existed for footwear materials. They showed us that the footwear industry is just a bunch of copycats and thieves, which is because there's nothing to hide in a shoe. It's all right there. All the IP.
Right. Yeah.
Right
it's literally right there. Yeah.
So, like just fascinating stuff. So back to inflection points. So that was 1, meeting them. Shark Tank was 2. Getting Dennis Driscoll on our team was number 3. Moving into an office was 1. Opening a warehouse was another. I literally can't even think of all of them, because there's just so many things that happen on an almost weekly basis, if not more quickly, there's always a big deal. Getting into REI, which took us years. That
was a huge,
really big one. We've got something that we're negotiating literally as we speak. Our VP of sales is talking with a retail account that if they do what they say they want to do, will be the biggest life-changing thing that's ever happened for our business. And I can't say more than that, unfortunately, but hopefully people will know about that by the spring. So,
so there's a number of inflection points, and kind of looking at it.
Wait, I got one more. Yeah. Sorry, I've got one more.
Go. Yeah.
This is a big one. So Lena's job when she was our CFO was constantly looking for money. So we found a local family office that invested on us. They gave us some debt that was very expensive. It was like 14%, but we couldn't find money any other way. And they, for some reason, believed in us. And we were very good clients for them, because we always paid them their interest on time. And they're huge fans. We ended up getting an SBA loan, there was literally a 2-foot high stack of papers that we had to go through.
That's what I've heard.
Insane in the membrane. And then in 2017, we did a Reg A plus equity crowdfunding raise, and raised about $1.1 million from about 1,100 people. But more, there were 4 states that were holding out and wouldn't let their citizens invest directly in companies. And we had someone on our team who showed them that was violating their own constitution, and they changed their laws. So we basically made it possible for the entire equity crowdfunding industry to raise money from all 50 states because we cracked the code on that. So that was a big one as well. Again, big, not because of the money we raised, but big because of the 1,100 people who said, when we polled them afterwards, the biggest reason they invested with us was to support us and make sure we could thrive, not because they were expecting to make millions of dollars off their $100 investment.
That is very inspiring.
It was really, this whole thing is just one humbling moment after another. I mean, one of our employees who works at our warehouse emailed us recently to thank us because we know that everybody in every part of our business is equally important for the success of our business. If the warehouse isn't working well, that's a problem. If customer service isn't working well, that's a problem. If the product team isn't working well, I mean, everybody's important. So we have a profit sharing inspired quarterly bonus plan. We take any profit we have in a quarter and we split a chunk of that evenly among everybody. I try not to take mine, but my wife insists. I don't know where that money goes. And but this woman in our warehouse said, I've been working in warehouses all this time. I've never been treated the way you guys treat us. And it allowed me to go buy my first home. And I mean, holy moly, or the first time one of our employees referred to working here as his career, you know, that was heart-wrenchingly wonderful. And so, you know, we are just constantly so grateful for everyone who's doing this, like our customers, our employees, our vendors. I mean, everybody. It's really, sometimes when we take a moment to step back and look at it all, it's just, it's hard to breathe.
You are privileged enough every so often that you can kind of see the impact your work has on other people. And maybe didn't even realize it.
There's just nothing better. You know, a friend of mine, he's a psychologist who's made a lot of money writing books and various other things, said making millions of dollars is easy. Find a way to improve people's lives a little bit and then ask them for a little money in return.
I love that.
It's a good one.
So I want to end with some kind of like down in the weeds tactical stuff, because I try to give, you know, people some actionable stuff. And I was impressed by two things. So I want to see if you can comment on them. One was that the challenges you guys faced were never the same. And so no. It seems like it was less important about a particular challenge than about your kind of framework of like how to be adaptive and how to learn. So how did you and your wife kind of approach that?
Well, we had no choice. So it was not, in fact, early on, Lena was upset one day. She says, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I said, well, no one knows what we're doing. No one's ever done what we're doing before. And so our job is not to know in advance. Our job is to figure out what we need to learn today and then learn it as quickly as we can, whatever we need to do. And I mean, and she went, oh, I can do that. I went, yeah, I know. So you were valedictorian. I just helped our valedictorian cheat on my physics test so he could become valedictorian. And it's, I mean, it's really, someone asked me a variation on that question. They say, you know, what motivates you? I said, we've got 72 employees and we're responsible for the health and wellness of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the world. What motivation do I need?
Yeah.
So I don't need to do something to get psyched up. I don't need to, you know, it's like, I got shit to do. I'm trying to change.
So you just like, there's a clear and obvious need and you just have to go out and fill it.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of really focused on sort of learning and being adaptive. And I wanted to dive into one thing as a case study. How did you think about, you know, for user acquisition, besides like word of mouth, when you had sort of reached like a decent size, like maybe you're doing like 500, 1 million, how did you think about, okay, we need to scale up? And I saw you started to get like real in depth in like advertising.
Yeah.
To a degree that most people don't really think about.
Yeah. So there are a couple things. Because we were at best debt financed, and we took on private equity money in December of 2020, but that didn't really change anything about what we do. So there are a couple things that I think about. And we couldn't do any paid advertising for the first few years because when the whole barefoot running natural movement thing took off, the big companies, there's two things happening. The big companies were buying clicks for like $3 to $4 a pop.
Sure.
And we were selling a $20 product. There was no way we $3 a click.
Right.
The other thing that happened is, you're in a dangerous market when annoying internet marketers are selling courses on how to game some system, and they use your market as the thing to game. So there was a bunch of people teaching how to do at like AdSense or AdWords arbitrage, and the keywords they were wanting to go after were our keywords. So because clicks were really expensive, so they were making a little bit on the spread. And we had a guy, one of our customers was the VP of AdWords, and he took a look at our account and said, yeah, you can't make any money by buying traffic right now. It's just too expensive. So once that changed, again, there's two things that happened at that time. The most
when was this approximately?
2000. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, I got to do this. Maybe 5 years in, so like 2014, maybe.
Got it. Yep.
Maybe 2015. What you're always looking for is leverage.
Right.
So that either means you're looking for someone who's already talking to the people that you care about, and you can engage with that person, or some place where you can just engage with a lot of people. So for example, TikTok, if you get on and do a TikTok video that people respond to, that's leverage. Advertising is leverage. You're running an ad in a particular place and it's going to all these people. But the thing that I have been super, super focused on from day one is making sure I knew all of my numbers inside out, backwards, left, and right. What does it really cost for me to make a product, bring it to our place, get it out the door, deal with returns and exchanges, keep the lights on in the building, pay my employees. And so therefore, I demanded from day one that we made a positive return on our ad spend. Our return on ad spend, ROAS, was always going to be positive. The thing I then did, though, is I broke that down into branded, aka literally people searching for our name,
Right.
non-branded, people searching for anything else that's related, top of funnel, people who've never heard of us, bottom of funnel, things like retargeting, where you can advertise to people who are hip to what you do. And I have different ROAS requirements for each one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So the top of funnel stuff, for top of funnel non-branded, someone who's never heard of us, don't know what we do, they're not necessarily even looking for shoes. They're just, people who have feet, preferably two, but not required.
Yep.
I want to see, originally, I was looking for a 3 times return on my ad spend. If I spend $1, I need to make $3, because otherwise I'm not making money. And we needed to make money in order to have enough cash to buy the inventory the next year, because we were growing like 50% plus year over year over year.
And was 3x break even, or was that like positive?
3x was a little positive.
Okay, got it.
Now, I will cut to the chase and say, as the business continued to grow and as we had more products and more people buying more products, I mean, the majority of our customers own more than 3 pairs of our shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So then we knew that the lifetime value of our customer was higher. So I reduced my 3x down to 2.5x. We could probably reduce it even more, but I don't want to yet. The flip side is, let's call it bottom of funnel branded. So we send an email to them, and instead of clicking on the link for Xero Shoes in the email, they go in and they type Xero Shoes, not in the location bar of their browser, but in the search bar. So they're searching for us accidentally because they don't know any different. And then they see a paid ad for us, because we want to have the paid ad and the organic ad to make sure one of our competitors can't steal. Can't conquest. Well, for that, I want my return on ad spend to be about 15x.
Right, because they already know you.
I already paid to get them to begin with.
Right. Okay, so that's something, for our listeners to really think hard about when you're advertising, your brand name versus,
yes. You want to pay to advertise your brand name too. Google used to have a report that they would show showing the benefits of having the paid listing and the organic listing.
Yes.
You just don't want to pay as much for the paid listing. But there's one other, but there's one other really important thing that I do on the ad side. And this is something that I say at least a half a dozen times a day to somebody. Mm-hmm. They're pitching me on something that they think is going to make me a bunch of money. And I say to them, I don't care what you think it's going to make. The only thing I can be in control of is what I'm going to lose if you're wrong. So how quickly and cheaply can I find out if you have your head up your butt?
So this is like a value investing perspective, a margin of a margin of safety perspective to like advertising and marketing.
You want, look, it's like going to Vegas. You want to walk in the casino knowing that once you're done with that $100 in your pocket, you're walking out the door. And if when people say to me, I'm confident that this thing's going to make you money, my response is, I don't care how you feel.
Right.
I want to know what it's going to take me to find out if you're right or wrong. If you're wrong, I don't want to lose a bunch of money. I don't want you to
What's
say,
the
well,
minimum amount you can spend to like,
yeah,
figure it out?
yeah. And there's sometimes where they'll say, well, I can figure it out for you for, $1. Sometimes they say $20,000. It's like, yeah, I'm not at the point where I'm going to risk 20 grand to see if something works.
Right.
Now, granted, I have lost 20 grand testing something, but I didn't plan to. So managing your risk is the most important part. Ideally, you want to find people who will do things on a performance basis to prove that they know what they're doing. You will have a hard time finding them because most people don't know their business well enough to do that. If they knew it really well, there's someone who's trying to charge us to do an audit of some aspect of our business. And we said, no, because after the audit is done, if we're the right kind of client for you, you're going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year off of us. So that audit should be free. And if you're not offering it for free, then we don't trust that you know how to do the rest of your business. So no. So know how much you're willing to risk. The day that Lena said to me, any experiment you want to do for $1,000 or less, you don't need my permission, I literally started crying because I was counting pennies. Now, we're a much bigger company, but that number hasn't gone up a lot. As you get bigger, you can spend more money on things that could have a bigger impact, that do cost more to test, but I'm still super, super conservative and demand that we get the return on ad spend that we're looking for. And if we don't get it, I want someone to, pay up. I want them to have some skin in the game.
Right.
Otherwise, we're bothered.
And then because, we're an email company, what has been your approach to email marketing?
We are very, I don't want to say aggressive. We have a very robust campaign. Or number of campaigns. We have about 9 different campaigns. So I'm not going to get them all off the top of my brain. We have our prospecting campaign. People opt in for something. And I'm going to do some very broad strokes. We have a post-sale campaign. So once they're buying, what do we do for the next whatever period of time? We have various follow-up campaigns based on what people have or haven't done. If they haven't bought in a while, we have campaigns to get them to come back. If they have bought in a while, we have campaigns to thank them and get them to come back. I will give this one away. One of the best emails that we have, and we do almost no initial discounting. I think giving a discount just because someone joins your list or because they spun a wheel. I think initial discounting is the cause of the end of the universe as we know it. It just makes people race to the bottom for price.
Yep.
And so we don't do that. But I have one email that goes out to people who've spent more than, I think it's $500 with us. And I say, because you just bought your 5th product or whatever it is, you're now one of our VIP customers. Sorry, the subject line is, I may be a moron. And it's, because you've just proven you're one of our best customers.
Yeah.
Thank you. Most marketers will say, it would be really stupid for me to offer you a discount on your next order because you've already demonstrated you're willing to buy things at full price. So I may be a moron, but if you want to use this 20% off coupon for your next order as my thank you, feel free. And if you think I'm an idiot for offering it, you can buy things at full price. And by the way, here's my direct phone number. Give me a call. I'd really just like to say thanks. And once a week, I get a phone call that usually goes like this. Hi, this is Steven. Oh my God, it's really you. So, why not? It's a blast. So that one does really, really well. Back to testing, just as an aside for an email. We did a test with some white hat deep fakes. Basically, I spent hours recording a thank you video, and they made it so that my mouth moved to match the name of the person who was getting the email. And they're going, oh, this is going to crush it because that personalized thing, people love that. They're going to buy more. Did nothing for us.
Really?
Absolutely nothing. Again, this is another point about advertising. People will tell you, here's best practices. Test everything, split test everything, because what works for somebody else may not work for you. And I'm like the king of proving that best practices are not best for us.
And then how often do you do like mass emails to your customers?
Once a week.
Once a week.
So once a week, we have a newsletter. We're continually playing with that to make it more and more interesting, entertaining, and valuable. But that's, and I'll say this, I was doing something kind of catch as catch can for years. Like when it occurred to me, I'd put out something, I'd send it out. And someone said, just start sending something once a week. And I was nervous. I was scared that everyone was going to opt out. People would hate it. We did the first time we did it over the first couple of weeks, no unsubscribes, no opt-outs. And it was very clear that I had thrown away $500,000 by not having done it sooner.
Okay. And then, because you know your numbers backwards and forwards, how much, like what percentage of your sales now comes from email? Because this is something I always try to tell to other people, is that email can actually drive a lot more of your sales than you think.
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. I can't answer that question, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
When we were looking for investors and we get approached by these private equity companies, they would always ask, what are your customer acquisition costs?
Yeah.
I would say, has anyone ever given you a numerical answer to that question? And they would say, well, yeah. And I said, oh, so can I lie to you the same way they lied to you?
Huh.
Like, what are you talking about? I said, all right, well, explain to me how I'm supposed to track the following. We run an ad on Facebook. Someone clicks on it. I pay for that. They come to our website. They opt in. I send them an email. I pay for that. They don't know how to click on the link in the email. So they do a search in Google and they click on the link that comes up and I pay for that. And then they end up buying on Amazon where I get no data and don't know who they are. How do I track that? And they go, well, you could make some assumptions. I go, oh, no. I don't make assumptions. That doesn't help me in any way. And then I would say, I know that our customer acquisition costs are good. And they would say, well, how do you know? I said, because we're profitable. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. So unfortunately, I can't answer your question because there's so many little touch points between here and there. And every little tool you're using, they want to claim 100% of the credit.
Right.
So if I look in Klaviyo, my email service provider, and I love them dearly, they only have one feature that I wish they had that they don't currently have. They'll claim credit because that was the last click before someone ordered. Right. So, I don't know. What I will say is the day that we send out an email, we will see our revenue lift by anywhere between 20 and 40% on that day compared to other days.
I want to underline that for the listeners out there. Something to think about. Something to think about also, you can email your users a lot more than maybe you think you can.
Yeah, and the only reason we're not doing twice a week or daily is we just haven't been able to think of a way of creating enough valuable content to justify doing that.
That's kind of the limiting. And then I'll also say everything else that Steven is talking about, all the different sequences like welcome, post purchase,
win back.
Win back. These are all like the absolute minimum best practices you should do. And I'm assuming when you implemented those, you saw a big lift.
Yeah, the couple things that made a big difference, that was one. We put an exit pop. So when people try to leave the site, there's a full screen takeover. That's that is a register to win $100 xeroshoes.com gift certificate. Like the day we did that, the amount of the number, we went from, I don't know how many leads we're getting per day, per week, per month. It was small, but it suddenly jumped to like 3,000 a month. And it was very clear to me that I had, again, lost millions of dollars by not having done that sooner. And every internet marketer and every marketer has stories of, the thing I knew I should have done that I never got around to or forgot to do or eventually did and realized that I lost a lot of money from not doing it. It's the way it is. But that was a real biggie. And I'll tell you one we're starting to do now that I'm very, I was going to say excited about, but that's not really true because again, I don't know if it'll work or not. But let's assume that it does work. If it does, I'm really excited. We're getting people to, we have a shoe finder quiz on our website. It's like,
tell me.
Yeah. Say some things about what you're looking for. We tell you which shoes are right for you. Now we know some things about you. We're building out sequences based on that to talk directly to you about what you're looking for. Now we're still going to mention the other things because there are people who like buy a running shoe from us who don't know we make casual sandals or casual shoes or snowshoes or all the other things. So we don't want to pigeonhole them too much, but we want to talk to them more directly. And if we can do that well, that's going to be super, super interesting. And
who do you use for the quiz provider?
There's a company called Cartful.
Okay. So I'm really intrigued by that. There's two. So from an email point of view, that gets into like creating segments.
Yeah.
And then had you guys done a lot with segmentation before that?
Yeah. Yes and no. We've done a lot of segmentation, but we never did anything that we could apply to email, or we never did anything that we could apply really to personalization on the website. So since day one of the internet, I mean, literally day one, the conversation was, now we can do one-to-one marketing. We'll know about you and be able to market just to you. It will never happen. What you're going to be doing at best is one, you, the entrepreneur, being one to a bunch of people who are as close to each other as possible marketing. But even then, you got to be really careful. Like in our world, if someone buys a men's shoe, that doesn't mean it's a man.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
So, you got to be careful about things like that. So
maybe like really light segmentation, but now you're kind of experimenting.
Well, again, on the prospecting side,
Yeah.
Where we do segmentation is on the advertising side, where we know enough about our customers, we can break things down into how much they've spent, how many times they ordered, the kind of products they ordered, where they live, a whole bunch of different things. And we use that to find lookalikes for those people in, say, Facebook and the Google platform.
But in the email retention side, you're not really splitting it out.
We are splitting it out so that we can send certain messages to people based on whether or not they've purchased over X amount of time or not purchased over X amount of time, and how much they've purchased over time. So we do want to acknowledge people as they're sort of staying with us in various ways, and do things to make sure they know what's going on, give them ways to get just the information they want and nothing else. If people only want to hear about when we're launching new products or having a holiday sale, we want them to be able to get that. If they want to get the newsletter, we want them to get that. If they want to get information via SMS instead of email, we want them to be able to do that. So we're doing that kind of segmentation, and that applies both for prospecting and for existing customers.
So that's a really, letting them choose their sort of communications preferences, how often they want to hear from you, what they want to hear about, giving them more control.
Yeah, and every now and then I will violate that because there'll be some important thing that I need to get their thoughts, opinions about, et cetera, some big thing that happens. But by and large, we kind of stick to it. But every now and then we do a mailing like to the entire list because something important has to be told to everybody.
Okay, cool. And the second thing I heard was that something about the quizzes, there seems to be a commitment effect, a commitment bias.
Yeah.
Of like people investing their time instead of money.
Well, it's a couple things. There's a whole theory about micro commitments. So for example, if you want someone to opt in for something, instead of showing the first thing they see, giving them a place to put in their email and click submit, is just have a button that says, get the thing that I'm giving away. And then it pops up a thing asking for their email. So because they made that little commitment of clicking, they're more qualified than if they put in what could be a fake email address because they're expecting to get whatever it is immediately.
Right. Yes.
So there's ways of playing with that. But so there's the micro commitment part, but the other part is simply that we've just helped them with something that they didn't know how to do, which is pick the right product. So over 70% of the people who go through that quiz end up buying. That doesn't mean that we just need to put more people in the quiz, because there's a reason they click to get help. And so they've already sort of self-selected. So it's not like, the quiz becomes our landing page, for example, but the people who go through that are very, very highly qualified and usually purchase in that same session. And if they don't purchase in that same session, now we know how to market to them again with things that are appropriate for them. I mean, here's the other thing about advertising, just kind of backing up a little bit. What we're creating, I refer to it as a 4D chessboard, because there's different levels of awareness that people could be in. Most people talk about aware, or like problem aware, then solution aware, then brand aware, then product aware, then they become customers, and then you're whatever. For us, I mentioned before, we have a level of the funnel above problem aware. It's, again, people who aren't even thinking about shoes or footwear or their feet. We can bring their attention to shoes and footwear and their feet in a way that makes them go, huh. Like, when I hold up a traditional running shoe with a pointy toe box and go, is this the shape of your foot? Because guess what? If it is, it's not supposed to be. And that could be causing a bunch of problems. And it makes people go, yeah, why am I shoving my foot into that thing that's not shaped like my foot? So at each level of the funnel, at each level of that awareness, you're trying to find as many different ways of getting content to them that they're going to respond to move them down to the next level. And if they don't move down there, what are you going to show them to encourage them to do it? And if they do, what's the thing after that? And what happens if they interact by just watching a video, but they don't come to your website? What happens if they watch the video and then they come to your website? Then there's a different thing you want to do. It gets super, super complicated in all the ways that you want to pay attention to user behavior. And frankly, it's not even important until you get to a certain size where there's enough, the effort that it takes to do that could possibly pay off. But at a certain point, those little things make a big difference. I mean, again, at 33.6 last year, if we did something that made a 1% difference, that's a lot of money. And if we do something that makes a 10% difference, that's a very large amount of money. And so we're always looking, that's another thing about leverage, is we're always trying to analyze a thing that we want to do. How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? And what's the potential upside? What's the potential downside? And we rank those to figure out what to do next. And that gets just as complicated as my four-dimensional, email chessboard.
And when you were much earlier, like at Shark Tank phase, and you were just putting out this content, it wasn't with like maybe an explicit funnel, but just more, you're like, okay, just make content for all different parts of the funnel, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, that was pretty much it.
And then, but as you got bigger, then it got more important to know.
Well, a little bit, because there's some ads that I've done where we walk people down the entire funnel in 5 minutes. We start with, I'll ask a question. I go, here's a dumb question. Do your feet feel better at the end of the day than they did at the beginning of the day? If your answer is no, you're not alone. And it's not because of what Big Shoe has been telling you. It's not because you need arch support or motion control or cushioning or padding or you pronate or you supinate or your kids haven't gone to the right college. It's because the shoes aren't letting your feet do what's natural, and that's making other joints in your body try to take over that foot function, and they can't do that. And then I show a quote normal shoe against our shoe, and I get two kinds of comments when I do videos like that. They're either, oh my God, I've never watched an entire YouTube ad before. I just watched yours. I watched it again, and then I bought your shoes. And the other comments are, hey, moron. And they think that they don't know that I'm like, one of the 5 leading experts on the planet about this stuff. And I'm really just synopsizing hundreds of pieces of research. In fact, today, a guy said, well, we need arch support and we need cushioning. It's not rocket science. It's just science. And I said, I think you don't know what science means, because here's 300 studies backing up everything I said and arguing with what you just said. And that's actual science. So I was not quite so obnoxious when I wrote it, because I have to edit a lot to take the obnoxious out of it when I'm responding to things like this. But it's like, no, you're not quite sure who you're talking to. And so, so we can walk people all the way down the funnel in one conversation. But there's sometimes where you just want to get them in to raise their hand and then get them with the next message and the next message and the next message. But you want to be leading them somewhere. You don't want to just say the same thing over and over and over. Someone sent me an email the other day. It was an amazing email because it was a great story that was very encouraging, and there was no call to action at the end. There was nothing like, if this makes sense, just click here to find out more, or click here to get a free whatever, or go buy that. I mean, there was nothing. And it's like, why did you bother doing that? You're not being, this is going to sound really weird, because this can sound like you're trying to be manipulative. And to be candid, you are. But if you're doing it because you're offering something that's really valuable, why would you not want to encourage people to take a next step that has the ability to be life-changing, and make it so that if it isn't life-changing, it's not going to be a problem for them? Like, again, that nutritional supplement thing that I mentioned, try it. If you believe in antioxidants, it's a great thing. If you don't like it, you get your money back. What's the big deal?
So give them a kind of a minimal next step, and let them know that it's low stakes enough that they can back out if it doesn't work out. Yeah.
And one next step could be, if you don't know what to do, call our customer happiness team. They're here to help. And I recommend using the phone app on your phone to do that, because that'll get you a better answer faster than if you try to email or post a question on Facebook without tagging us, where we'll have no way of seeing it.
Okay. I think this will be a good place to kind of wrap it up.
Okay.
I think I've imposed on you long enough, and hopefully our listeners have gotten a ton of useful tips. If you are,
can I get? I'm going to give one. I have to give one more.
Please.
I just want to highlight this.
Yeah.
When I made those videos at the very beginning and gave away the whole business, this is sort of like the one thing that people seem to forget, which is the more you can offer something of value to people, the better. I met people who said, I watched your videos and I never bought anything from you, but I made my own sandals based on what you did, or I made my own shoes based on what you did. I said, great. I'm not trying to win everybody. I'm just trying to be helpful. And that's going to work out well for everybody at some point, whether they buy from me or buy from somebody else or make their own thing or do whatever else. So the question that I'm continually asking myself and never come up with enough answers that I can deploy fast enough is, what can I do that's going to be valuable for people? And how can I get that to as many people as possible? So quick example, people who there are a lot of people who believe the modern running shoe is good for them, despite the fact that 50% of runners and almost 80% of marathoners get injured every year, and that hasn't changed.
Right.
I can't tell them to try my shoes because they think what we're doing is wrong. That's okay. I have an ebook coming out where I'm going to be able to advertise it with an ad that'll say, do not run in these shoes. Because there's a study that came out showing that if you just do a foot strengthening exercise program and run in regular shoes, your risk of injury is reduced by 250%. And there's another study that shows if you just walk in shoes like ours, it builds foot strength as much as doing that foot exercise program. So there isn't a study showing if you just walk in our shoes and run in regular shoes, you have that lower injury risk, but kind of do the math. It's the same exercise program in the middle of the equation. So don't run in these shoes, run in whatever you like, wear these when you're done for active recovery and building strength that could help you in the future. People don't know this. This is really valuable information for people who may never otherwise think of ever buying anything from us. And all I'm trying to do is give them the information to be helpful, because why not?
and just figuring out new ways to kind of create value for other people, and that will sort of, come back to you.
I've never seen that not happen.
I think that is a fantastic lesson. Okay, well, we'll wrap it there. So let me say, so if you want to learn more about Steven and his amazing shoes, xeroshoes.com, Xero Shoes. He's on Twitter, Facebook, all the social medias. You can find some great articles about him on Starter Story. Any other things I left off?
That'll pretty much cover it. We're also in the EU at xeroshoes.eu. If you go to Xero Shoes, guess what? That'll get to us too. That's a whole story behind that that's pretty entertaining. And yeah, everywhere you would @ or / you can @ or / Xero Shoes.
Just old school. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in. This has been the Heroes of E-commerce podcast, brought to you by Ryzeo, a proven email system that's made millions for e-commerce sites. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. For even more insights, visit our website at ryzeo.com, where we share resources on email marketing that grows sales. Until next time, happy marketing.